everyone, welcome again to our Thursday video. It's a real pleasure this week to introduce Ruth Judson, one of our young people who's really been thinking hard and praying about what she's about to share with you, and there's so much to engage with, so I hope you enjoy it now. I'm going to hand over to her. Ruth.
Hello, my name's Ruth, and I wanted to share some thoughts that the Lord has put on my mind in relation to the first 3 chapters of 1 Samuel. So we're introduced to Hannah, who's a woman that desperately wants a child, but we're told in verse 5 that the Lord has closed her womb. What inspired me about Hannah is that she didn't give up. Year after year she prayed for a child, and when she didn't conceive, she continued to pray faithfully, and in the end, the Lord blessed her with a child. This made me think, what do I do when a prayer I desperately want answering doesn't seem to be answered? Do I give up praying? Do I become angry with God? Or do I persevere in prayer because I have faith that God will always come through in the end, even if it's not in the way I was expecting or the way I hoped it would be? Take this time to ask yourself the same question. What do you do when you can't see an immediate answer to your prayer? Before Hannah was given a child, she made a promise to God, saying, "Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life." A child was what Hannah most wanted in life, yet she was willing to sacrifice him to the Lord because her reverence and love for the Lord were greater than her earthly desires. Which is greater in your life, your earthly desires or your reverence for the Lord? The Lord. I was then led to think about the gifts that God has given me and whether or not I utilize them for his glory. When Hannah goes to the temple for the first time after her son's birth, she takes a bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine as a sacrifice of thanks, but she also fulfills her promise to the Lord and dedicates Samuel to the temple. I saw this as a metaphor for the gifts that God has given me. It would have been easy for Hannah to hold on to the most precious thing in her life, which was her son, but she was able to not care about what was important to her, but to think about what was important to the Lord. So she not only gave up the smaller gifts of wine, flour, and a bull, but she also gave the child to the Lord. It led me to wonder, how much are we willing to give back to God? If your instinctive response is everything, then take this time to reflect on whether that's actually true. And if your initial response was, "I'm not sure," then take this time to talk to God about it. Moving on to the end of chapter 2, where we see a very damning prophecy against the house of Eli. He is told that the Lord will cut off his strength and that no one in his family line will grow to old age. I was really struck by the fact that Eli didn't fall into despair and try to plead with God. Instead, he said these beautiful words, "He is the Lord, let him do what is good in his eyes." Over the last few weeks, we've been doing Pete Greig's prayer course at Elevate, and it has really challenged the way I pray. Previously, I tended to pray for what I wanted, but I've tried to shift my mindset into alignment with God's will, even though I'm not always sure what that is. Eli's words are a challenge to me. Am I prepared to go along with everything God does, or do I try and challenge him? Particularly in these uncertain times, are we trusting the will of God? I want to finish by encouraging you to share how God has spoken to you with the people around you. I personally have been very encouraged by my Beacons WhatsApp group, on which we've been sharing testimonies, Bible verses, songs and photos of walks we've been on, all of which God has spoken to us through. Take the time to encourage each other by sharing what God has been doing in your lives.